Great, we'll go ahead and get started. So I want to welcome back Jordan Smith from the Fleischman Career Center. He's a career consultant there. He kicked off our Life After FRI series back in October, and today he's back to talk about how to ace your interview and how to really take those FRI experiences and make them shine when you're going into an interview. So I'm going to hand it over to Jordan to take it away for us.
Yes, hello. It's nice to see everyone again. I'm going to share my screen just so the presentation is open. Like Meg said, we're going to be talking about interviewing specifically today. And I do have this presentation broken up where at first it's just going to be some more general overview of interviewing and some tips. And then we're going to narrow it into specifically how you can leverage your FRI experience to excel in several different questions when it comes to interviewing. Okay. So specifically, you can see here, these are going to be the objectives we're going to go over. First couple that are going to be, again, more the overview is going to be identify key areas to prepare for an upcoming interview, understand how to answer common interview questions. Then we're going to get into the FRI specific components, how you can identify and articulate how your FRI experiences can support answering a variety of common interview types of questions. And then in addition, kind of support with the interviewing is going to be really understanding how to utilize one of the resources you all have available to you. It's called Big Interview. It's one of my favorite resources that we offer. It was actually one of the tools I used during my job search, and it really helped me put out my best interviews. And so we are going to talk about how you can utilize the different features on the tool. And specifically, there are going to be questions that are tailored just for kind of like the FRI experiences that you can practice outside of this presentation. So the purpose of interviewing. So for the employer, it's going to be to narrow down the candidate pool. Employers are going to be looking for candidates who can do all really three of these areas, provide value to the organization, and they're going to list that out in the description, whether it's a research opportunity, internship, job. They want to make sure that you have the skill set to fill the areas that they need help with, and then fits best in the organization. This is going to relate to the work culture of the company itself. And so really kind of seeing like, what are their values? What is their mission statement? It might be the team culture and the company culture as a whole. So they really want to see like, where do you place within kind of what they have set up there, what's been kind of developed, and then has potential for growth. So I always like to point this one out because it's something I didn't know when I was even doing a lot of my like internship search and including into my like career searches. You're going to see in the description that you may not have all the experiences, right? That is okay. And that is very common. A description's often made with knowing that it's like the most perfect situation if they want to put out there. And that's just not common for someone to embody all of those requirements. And so don't be intimidated if you don't have all those experiences. You want to reflect and just see what you have done and realize you have the skill set to potentially learn if there are some areas that you haven't experienced before or just haven't learned that process yet. So I always like to point that out because I know it's in the past it deterred me from applying to positions that I could have potentially been qualified for and received the offer, okay? And then on the opposite end, the interview is not just for the company and the employer. It's actually going to be for you as well. You really do, there is only so much you can gain from like the job description, research description, and even some maybe research you do outside of that using Glassdoor to see like the company culture and things of that sort. And so this interview is really going to give you a chance to explore the description much more in depth. Make sure you kind of understand exactly what's expected of you and what kind of impact you'll be making in this role. As well as, more importantly, I would say it's hard to figure out a culture of a team and the company just from what's written on a website. This is going to allow you to really dive deeper in and see, does it fit kind of what values you have? Is this going to be a place that's most supported for how you work best? Things of that nature. And we are going to talk about questions you should ask during the interview further in the slides. So you'll kind of know how to kind of engage with that part. So when you're preparing for an interview, there are really going to be two areas of research you need to be doing. One is yourself, and the other is going to be that company. I can't stress this part enough with just like treating kind of the interview process as if you're going to like study for an exam. It seems, I feel like easier and like a concept, like you're going to be talking about yourself in an interview and your experiences. Like that seems simple in itself. When you're actually interviewing, it's very uncommon to be in a situation where you're going to have one or like several people in front of you asking you questions that you maybe really never had to answer. And you're going to have to do it in a kind of like a concise way that is kind of like a balance of like, again, not too humble, not too arrogant, like in this middle of just solid confidence. And that's not just a natural thing that comes for a lot of us. You really do kind of have to figure out how you want to communicate all of that while people are sitting there judging you and kind of, using that to guide a decision that you really care about. So I really stress to make sure you are taking the time to reflect on your experiences, especially in relation to the specific position. Okay. You are the one who's responsible for bridging why you're qualified for this role. And you might have some outside experiences that aren't directly related. So you are going to have to build those bridges for the employers to see, yes, this person is qualified. This person's bringing a lot of different insights and experiences that are going to really add value to our team, things of that nature. So I encourage creating a study guide. Essentially, I would list out, you can do research. Big Interview will help you with this, a tool I referenced earlier. And you can kind of see what potential questions are most commonly asked in your field or what you're going for. And so you want to list out those questions and then have your resume or CV with you and kind of go through and bullet point which of these experiences have you done could answer this question. You don't necessarily want to always write out script for script, because if you try memorizing that, it could come off very robotic, and that's not going to be helpful for the employer in that sense. That could work against you of not being interested. And so you do kind of want to list more bullet points of either like some key stories or key experiences within that role that you might want to talk about for that position or for that specific answer. I always say it's nice to have a couple. Like if you are looking at, tell me about your biggest, one of your top accomplishments. Well, you might grab a couple experiences that you've done that you have big accomplishments that you've done in each of those. That way, if you've already used one of your experiences to answer a couple questions prior, you have another option to pull from to show them the variety and to not sound too repetitive and just using one experience to describe your whole kind of qualifications. Okay. So it's nice to, I always say like list out those questions, grab your experiences, use them as bullet points within those questions of how you could answer that question using that experience, and maybe add a couple other bullet points of some maybe key experiences within that role that would help you remember how to describe it. Again, we're going to talk then once you kind of got this research done about yourself and you're feeling good about just kind of your relation to this role and your qualifications, practicing is such a big deal. I think there's two main ways in our office that you can actively practice. One is going to be with Big Interview. And again, we're going to talk about that. I'm actually going to show you the tool, and I'm going to have an email template that will kind of show you how to access these questions that are specifically for more research related questions. So you are going to be able to get that experience in. With Big Interview, when you practice doing these kind of virtual mocks, you're actually going to get instant feedback on I think it's 15 different areas through artificial intelligence. So it's going to be a quick way for you to see how many ums did you say? What was your piece of speech? Any power words, filler words, things of that sort. That's going to be already a key indicator to see how you are already doing with kind of your interviews. Some people really can do them very well naturally, but I think sometimes it's more the time I would say it seems like it'll be easier than it is. And then when you actually practice, you're like, all right, maybe there needs to be some editing, some work there to just have your best self come out. The second part would be, I always say Big Interview is the nice pre-mock interview experience, because you can do that on your own and at your own time and kind of build up that confidence. And then you can schedule mock interviews at the Fleischman Center. You do that through your Hire Bing account, and they're 30-minute sessions. We have questions ready for you. You can send questions if there's specific ones you'd want to engage with. And I definitely encourage these. These are going to be the closest realistic thing that you can get to seeing how you're doing, how you'll, to predict how you might perform when it comes to your actual interview. These can be done virtually. These can be done in person. So depending on what interview you have going on, probably makes the most sense to do whatever platform it is going to be on. So I would stress, no matter what, definitely get one of those in, even if you think especially if you think you're great at interviewing, just to make sure, just to kind of gauge where you're at. And then again, we'll give suggestions and feedback on how you can improve. So again, you're putting your best self forward. And so the other part that you want to research is it's going to be the company. Now, breaking this up, the first thing is you might be applying to multiple positions. So, I mean, it's really key to make sure that when you're going into an interview, you really focus in on the specific position, especially if you've got a lot of interviews going on. You don't want to mix those up. It won't, that won't give good first impressions in that aspect. And so really read through it, and then you'll see one of the questions that you should always have ready for an employer. If there's anything about the description that you're not so certain of like what this task is going to require of you, or anything of that nature, you want to have that question listed so that when you do get that time at the end of an interview, you can ask for that. You can talk about it then and get that clarity that you need, so that way you fully understand what this role is expecting of you. So if you get an offer, you can properly make an informed decision the best way. All right. The second part is this part I can't stress enough, because a lot of interviews are going to ask you, what do you know about us? Like, what do you know about the company? And even like, why are you interested in this and in this role? But specifically with what do you know about us? That is not a question that you can kind of necessarily make up, right? Like, so if you were to ask about your weaknesses or your strengths, like you may give a strength that's not your like top strength because you just in that moment, you couldn't think of something, and you can kind of make that work. When you get asked like, what do you know about us? It's really got to be the facts. And so you really want to do the work ahead of time to know some key things about that company. And there's enough resources that make this process pretty easy. The LinkedIn, they have a LinkedIn company page, their own website, if you do a Google News search. And you would want to look for things like their past accomplishments, what's the size, history, culture of the organization, their market, industry trends, any of their product and services, and so on. You do want to have that good overview. So again, if you get asked that question, you can properly articulate it. But then this is going to be good for you as well, right? You want to understand who would you potentially be working for, and make sure like all that fits your needs. Or if you have any questions, you can ask those further during the interview as well. You really want to make sure you do this research ahead of time, because you don't want to ask any question that you could have done that could be answered on the website or just by doing a little research. That's going to show off that you're maybe not as prepared or you're not as interested. Okay. And when it is competitive, like you never know fully how competitive a particular role might be based on the competition. And so things like this, it really can make a huge impact. Those impressions really go a long way when they have a lot of great candidates to kind of work through. So you did your research, and now about the company, and now it's like getting into kind of preparing the questions that they might ask you. I want to kind of give you an overview here. And like I said, further into this presentation, we're going to break down some of the some questions specifically and how your FRI experiences could be really helpful in helping you answer that kind of interview question. So to the left, you'll see first, there's the types of interview questions you might be asked. Traditional questions, we're going to talk a lot about those because those are going to be typical things like tell me about yourself, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. There's a whole cohort of those traditional questions on Big Interview that you can actually practice. And then experience credential verification based questions are going to be things like, how much experience do you have utilizing maybe a certain laboratory technique. It's just going to be checking in on those specific areas of interest that they have to just see how much have you already engaged with that, how much, it's going to maybe give them an idea of how much training you might need and how much you might not need. Behavioral-based questions are kind of questions you've probably been asked before, but maybe just didn't know that they're called behavioral-based questions. Essentially, these are questions that are going to ask you to describe a past experience. So like, tell me about a time when you worked on a team. And they want to hear about that experience because they're going to use it as a predictor of how you might perform in their current role. We are going to have a whole slide dedicated to these because these questions, there is an acronym that we use to help you best answer those type of questions. I feel like these are the most risky ones for like having run-on sentences that describe a story, but don't actually get to kind of the impacts that you've made. And it doesn't give employers kind of the information they need to kind of gauge your talent. So we'll break down the strategic way to answer those. You could have potentially role-playing or hypothetical questions, scenarios. And so if that's kind of in your industry, you would want to practice kind of potential situations that could happen. I always say, like, you plan for the easy ones. You also plan for the most difficult ones. I remember planning for the most difficult one. And I was like, there's no way they're going to ask this. And then in my interview, they asked exactly that one. And so I had strategies ready just so that if that worst case scenario that happened was going to be the most challenging, I was prepared. And that really made a huge difference in that particular interview. And lastly, like current events. These are especially common, honestly, with graduate school interviews, asking you like, what are your thoughts on specific things that are happening within the field of study that you're engaged with? So you would want to do some research on those kind of events, have some opinions with it. I will say with any question, if it is a lot to prepare for. So if there's going to be questions that maybe you just could not prepare for, or that you just didn't know they would ask that specific one, I will say with those, I really do encourage you to always say, like, you know what, that is a great question. I'm just going to take a moment to think about it. Disengage from watching them look at you and give yourself permission to actually critical think. If you are doing a lot of research and preparation ahead of time, there's a good chance one of the things you've like kind of prepared for will relate to a question that maybe you didn't specifically study itself. And so doing this foundational work really will aid you if there are some that throw you off. But I do encourage you to say that, like, great question. I'm just going to take a moment to think about it, because it can be, I see on the opposite end, when you're just staring at them, staring at you, it kind of becomes anxiety provoking and it's hard to kind of critical think. You'll start thinking about like how much the silence is going by. And it just makes it harder to actually get through that experience. So definitely a big tip that seems subtle, but I think it can make a really big difference. And then to the right, preparing questions ahead of time. You always want to have questions ready. And I would say usually it's about 3 to 5 questions, because some of the questions might get answered during the interview and they're still going to kind of expect that you have questions to ask them. So you do want to kind of have a little bit more than normal, just so that if in case that happens, you would still have something to ask. It is going to demonstrate your interest, seriousness, and knowledge. And so you always want to have that. I'm going to give you a couple examples of questions you can ask in the next slide. But I will say when you ask your questions, kind of a nice finishing question is always asking about the next steps. Thank you so much. That's the rest of my questions. The last one I would have is just in general, what does the timeline look like this for the next part of the process? That can go in and give you kind of expectations that they're looking to finish candidates in the next 2 weeks. You can hear back from us in week 3 or something of that sort. That will help you kind of know, just have a strong expectation of when to hear back. And that way you'll also be able to kind of gauge when maybe you should do a follow-up if you haven't heard anything. But as for those questions to ask, I told you earlier, if you do enough research on the company, you don't want to ask something that technically you could have found on their mission statement on their website or something of that sort. So these are some questions that really help go deeper, or something you couldn't necessarily figure out by doing some research on the web or something of that sort. So first, what does a typical day look like in this position? I do think you're going to see a lot of tasks on the research descriptions and things of that sort. And so this really is going to kind of organize that for you and say, like, this is like kind of what I could expect. This is how it kind of visually gets put into place with all those expectations. And that will really help you, again, have a stronger clarity sense of like what this role is expecting of you to do. And then kind of going off of that in a different way, what do you hope to see accomplished by the employee, intern, or research assistant after the first 2 months? Again, kind of giving you more of a visual of putting all those words and kind of descriptions in the job description into place. So you just have that strong sense of what this really is about. What do you like best about your job, and how would you describe the work culture? Really are culture related questions in general. These are things, again, that there's only so much you can gain on the internet from this. They might have like what they value as their work culture on their website, but it's really going to be important to actually hear how they describe it. This really is something that can play a huge difference in whether you want to stay at a place or choose this internship or research opportunity over another. Some cultures might say we're very collaborative and innovative, and when you walk in, we are going to ask like, how was your weekend? And have that kind of maybe relationship building part. Some other organizations might say, honestly, we're really results driven. This is a very fast paced environment, and that's kind of what's expected of you. And you might thrive in one or the other better, and you might have a preference for one or the other better. So especially when you get a lot of offers, this is a great way for you kind of just use as like another framework of like, which one might I most be suited for? Which one I might want to choose, all right? And yeah, I'll have probably a lot of experience with virtual these past couple of years, and so I will just briefly go over these. Some of the things these were, I think, more in place when virtual wasn't as common, and I think people were still trying to use some in-person tactics for virtual stuff and things of that sort, and then go always the best. I always emphasize dress appropriately. In fact, I feel like in some of the past years with Zoom, like some of that, like you can see where the flaws can go with that. And there was actually someone in the interview suite once who did try to get away with that, and whether the employers does it as like a routine check, or if they saw that they were wearing sweatpants, asked them to stand and could see that. And that was a horrible first impression, and it did not lead well. It really, especially if that's something that starts off the stage, it really sets the expectations and kind of can really make it difficult to even go through with the interview, whether they would even choose to do that. So always dress appropriately. It should also put you in the zone, kind of more so. Like if you're getting into your professional attire, really acknowledging this is like a professional conversation. You want to put your A game on to best sell yourself in a confident, clear manner. double check your audio, video, internet. Obviously, just like what just happened a little bit ago, there's only so much you can prepare for, but it is being ready. Things could happen. You want to make sure it's like you would have put your best foot forward, made sure the internet was working ahead of time, signing in early, having a potential backup plan if necessary, things of that sort. Pick a distraction-free background. Nothing, just don't have anything too crazy. Again, especially in the virtual world, there are things that could happen. Like I remember mock interviewing someone and their cat just kept meowing and meowing, and it happens. And so you just kind of have to be in those moments. Like things could come up. And if you need to, you can always say like, I'm so sorry. This is kind of unexpected. Can I take care of this real quick? If that is one of those situations that come up, it's still just doing your best to kind of still be professional and handling uncontrollable circumstances that can come up. I would say these last couple of parts are really important. Being mindful of hand gestures and facial expressions. Virtual especially can be a little difficult to add your full authentic self in, and also depending on your personality, those could be some other factors. I do want to point out, you don't have to be someone who's like, I use extrovert introvert just because I think it's an easier picture to see for this kind of example. But an extrovert might be more with their hands and might have different tone and it might come off more natural, but they still need to be aware that they need to be focused and detail oriented and still answering the question. And then if you're maybe more introverted, it's like you might still have those details that focus and you're answering the question well, but you might want to have like a sticky note to the side to make sure you are engaging more so with body language to show interest and kind of passion and things of that nature. I always just like to point out the detail thing though, with you can have a lot of enthusiasm, but showing passion isn't just your tone and your volume and your hand gestures. It's showing that you've actually researched yourself in relation to this position and giving quality responses. And so enthusiasm is going to cover that up. If you really haven't prepared, it's only going to go so far. So there's a balance there to really get yourself into. And if you know you fall more into one than the other, I put a sticky note on the side of your laptop or something just to kind of keep reminding you, or to kind of have that just like ping every so often. And when it comes to utilizing notes, obviously if it's virtual, that is maybe a little easy. That is going to be a little easier to do, especially if it's phone. You could have that right out. But the big thing I would say is like it can be obvious, especially if you're on Zoom or webcam. So I would still stress against anything that's like fully written out. You just want little maybe reminder notes. I remember when I interviewed for this position, I couldn't remember. I knew I wasn't going to remember the award that this center had won. Like it was a lengthier award. And so I had that written to like the side just so that when they asked me, what do you know about us? I was able to easily kind of quickly look and just use that to help guide myself and kind of responding that way. But again, if you have like a full list of notes, you don't want to come off like monotone or be seen like looking so actively, because then it will show that you did not prepare. All right. All right, so that is the general aspect of kind of just some tips I want to get with interviewing. If you do have any questions, just write those down and we'll talk about that at the end. I'm going to try to make sure I save time for that so we can get to those. But I am going to segue now more into tailoring kind of your interviews to more of your FRI experiences. And so how this is kind of set up first, you're going to see the questions we're going to go over. I'm going to have examples for these, some that are going to be full on depth answers, and some are going to be more just examples that you could use from FRI to answer those questions and some strategies. But I will say, if you look down, I want to point out some of this is going to be like really tailored to like, especially like research positions and how much this program has truly set you up to be a very strong candidate for those positions. But I do want to point out it's also set you up to be a really strong candidate for multiple different positions, even if you still don't fall into research. You have a very transferable skill set that you're gaining from this program, the teamwork that you do each semester, all the written communication and verbal communication from like the research proposals and the poster presentations, analytical skills, the problem solving. All of these skill sets are going to be required in so many different positions. And so you're still going to have this to leverage if you're not sticking within maybe the potential research realm. And that could be for other reasons too. Like maybe you want to be an RA just to support yourself, just get some leadership experience on campus. This is going to be an amazing opportunity for you to kind of leverage this and talk about how you have strong teamwork skills from 3 semesters working in a team and so on. So very versatile in how you can leverage this program to support you with your candidacy for multiple different kinds of interviews. The first one we're going to go over, I do find that this tends to be the one of the hardest questions for interviewing. Tell me about yourself. I will be honest, like when I had my first professional interview, I studied so many other questions. I don't know how I really missed this one. Maybe I thought can't remember all the way. Maybe I thought it was going to be an easy one to respond to, but when they asked me, I remember not being prepared for this question. And I was so confused by it that my response was, they said, Jordan, tell the committee about yourself. I said, sure. What do you want to know? You don't want to start out the interview like that. You don't want to answer an interview question with another question back to them. And so that was a struggle. That was definitely a big miss for me. And I can't stress this enough now to students because it is the first question most likely asked. And it's going to set the stage, I think, for your confidence for multiple other questions. So there are kind of different formulas that you could use to help support yourself with developing your response to this question. I like to use the formula, the present, past, future, to kind of gauge it. I think essentially this is like your trailer of you, right? Like a movie trailer. And so I don't want you to be thrown off with, you're going to say stuff and you're telling me about yourself that you will most likely answer way more in depth in other questions, but you're just giving little snippets in this tell me about yourself, because again, it's like your trailer, you're just giving them an overview of multiple different aspects about yourself. So first would be like the present. You speak about who you are now, what is it that you do in terms of work or study, or perhaps you share a recent accomplishment. I find this is great where you start out with, some overall, just like I'm a student at Binghamton University studying chemistry, something of that sort. Then the past speaks about how you got to where you are now and how your past experiences have prepared you for the job. So what did you do previously that kind of started to get you interested in this kind of impact that you want to make, this kind of with these kinds of positions that you're applying to? What led up to that point? And this gives them a little bit of who you are, like what impacts are important to you, what skill sets have you developed that you really want to utilize in your work, things of that sort. And then the future, this part's a really important one because I think for most interview questions, I find the hardest part for a lot of people is knowing when to like kind of close like that last part. So here it's going to be the future, like share a bit about your future career-based plans and why you think this job will help you achieve that. So it would be like, yeah, kind of like, why are you interested in this research position? Like what about it interests you, and maybe even what about the culture of the company interests you, things of that sort. And then it finishes nicely. It's just a full overview of who you are, but you tailored it a lot to this position. That's important to know because the personal stuff comes out still in relation to your career versus like, I know this question sometimes people will answer like, my hobbies are da, 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 and things of that sort, but you don't want to go that route. You want the personal to still be professional in that aspect. So that would be like describing like, why are you interested in this field? What kind of skills do you have? What do you love about us? What kind of interests you? What impact do you want to make? Things of that nature. So for this question, I did write out an example. Now, I don't want you to feel like by any means that you would use this specific example to answer your own, because it's one, I know you all have versatile, various experiences, so it won't even work for that. But I did want to give you some sense of how this might be applied, just to give you some examples to work with of how you might leverage FRI to help you with telling about yourself, especially if it's in relation to a position that's going to have like a strong research focus. So it looks so lengthy, but honestly, it's your interview questions are usually anywhere between 30 seconds and 2 minutes. It does vary. You'll see, I think more so 30 seconds to 1 minute, but when you get to behavioral-based questions, when you're giving enough context, it does take a bit to describe. So let me go through this one and just give you kind of an overview, and all the slides and everything are going to be sent to you, so you'll have more time to digest this. But if I were to say, they're like, yeah, Jordan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I might say, yeah, I'm a sophomore at Binghamton University studying chemistry and currently conducting research with 4 of my peers. We are focusing on biomolecules and neurodegenerative diseases and cancer to better understand how they function and in turn provide insight in targeting and designing novel medicinal therapies. My interest in research stems from just having a natural curiosity for how things work. I developed a specific interest in chemistry from volunteering at a local middle schools and teaching their students chemistry through conducting various experiments. My passion was solidified, though, for my participation in the first year research immersion program I've done at Binghamton University. Throughout the 3-semester program, I have learned how to create a research proposal, utilize various laboratory techniques related to biomedical chemistry, and at this point, I've completed over 130 hours of lab hours with my team. It's through this program that I know I want to conduct research in the field of biomedical chemistry, and this is what's led me to your position. I am eager to bring my experience to a program where we can continue to make impacts with medicinal therapies. I'm excited about the opportunity to enhance my skills even further as a student researcher. So there you go. You get a little bit, again, of that present, past, future. This one, obviously, again, is very tailored if it was going to a research role. If it's not so tailored, like you could always go more general to talk about different aspects. And so if you're applying something that was going to have maybe a lot of problem solving. Maybe you'd still mention maybe FRI in your experiences and say like, that's how you knew like you really love to solve problems. And you might keep it a little bit more general, but you're still going to get a lot of value describing like, I got 3 semesters of problem solving in, and that's definitely what's made me really qualified and interested in the particular role that you have at your company right now, something of that sort. Okay, so that is one example of applying to tell me about yourself. Next one we're going to talk about is tell us about your strengths. So a couple things to know about this one. Let's say I would say you want to list out your strengths, and then you'd want to choose the top ones in relation to the position that you're applying to. So you're obviously going to use the description to guide a lot of this. I would say a key area to definitely hone in on is those preferred qualifications that you often see in descriptions. Obviously, the regular qualifications, they're expecting everybody to have those, and the preferred would be something that they're really looking for. And so if you have those, that would kind of shape maybe the ones that you want to describe for that particular interview. And talked about this earlier, but I think the practice is so important because there is this healthy balance of trying to figure out like, how do you got to sell yourself. It's competitive, and you want to make sure you're telling them that you are a very qualified candidate for this role and you're very interested in this role. And there is this balance between being too modest and also maybe coming off arrogant. And it's not always something that's easy to tell. And that's why I think practice is so important. I've definitely come in for a mock interview for that reason, because I think tone is much easier to see. Even on a big interview, you're not really it's not gonna pick up on tone and tell you that. So I definitely would say coming in for an interview will really help us see kind of where you're at with that, and giving suggestions if needed. And for the strengths question, something that's so important to acknowledge is that you need proof. So everyone could say that they are a great team player or that they're a great problem solver. And I find that people will just say, yeah, my 3 strengths, I'm a great problem solver, I'm a great team player, and I have strong analytical skills. And they might give like a brief couple other sentences after that, but they want to see, anyone can say that. So they want to see, okay, you're telling me that you're a great team player. What experiences have you done that you've worked on a team, and what makes you a great team player? What is that? Where's the proof there? Like, they really want to see that aspect to just get more confidence that you really do have this skill set and understand like what your style is going through. So I have an example, again, for tell us about your strengths, and we're going to use teamwork as an example for this one, using FRI to guide this, all right? And so this one, again, this would be a great one if you, teamwork is going to get asked about in so many other positions outside of just research. So this is one to just always know about, because it is, I think you get a lot of extensive teamwork skills. So it's one that really is going to be well suited, and something that maybe a lot of first year or sophomores don't have yet. So this is going to make you an exceptional candidate. So if they were to say, tell us about one of your strengths, and you said, I would say one of my strengths is my ability to effectively work in a team. Throughout my education, I have worked on several academic group projects, a few times while volunteering in the community, and really owned this skill through my involvement in the first year research immersion program. In FRI, I have worked on a 6-person team for 3 semesters with a focus on research. I've learned the importance of having clear communication and organizational skills when successfully working in a team. I am always aiming to make sure my teammates understand and agree with how we delegate tasks and reiterate important details such as deadline dates to keep everything in line. This approach has helped us make sure we are able to progress in our research each week and have all our information ready to present at the end of the year poster presentation day. I also feel like my style of teamwork has helped prevent miscommunications, which in return lessens potential conflicts among the team members. Okay, so it's a full overview of like, I wanted to point out how when you do have other aspects of experiences that have helped shape this skill, I like the strategy I tend to like is to kind of do that first opener that would say like, you've done it here, you've done it there, you've done it this, but then you got to choose one to hone in on. And that's kind of giving you the best of both worlds. Like you're showing like, I have a lot of experience in this. And here's one clear example of maybe a top accomplishment that really proves that I've done this well. This is also going to be important, this style, for occasion you're going to say something in a previous answer and you're going to use that experience for another one. And so you could always say like, oh yeah, like I mentioned back, like I mentioned a couple questions ago, I have done FRI and specifically da 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 da. Those transition sentences can really help. There are going to be some repetitions, and I think it just smooths out the process. It is going to be normal that you're going to use your an experience for a couple different questions. You just don't want it to be the main experience the whole entire time. Okay. So then, next question: how have your previous positions prepared you for this position? You would review your resume or CV to really, get this guidance. And I wanted to break this up a couple different ways because, one, this position, doing FRI, and if you're applying to like maybe a research role, it's really going to prepare you for so many of those laboratory skill set that they're going to be asking for. So you definitely can look at the description, see that you're very qualified by the skill base and be able to articulate that. I have an example in the next slide and I'll show you how this can be done. But I also do like to reiterate that another advantage that I feel like gets slept on a little bit is that it confirms your passion or your interest for either the research, for research in general, or for research and the specific research stream that you could be applying to. So that clarity is so powerful. They're going to get someone who they already know that you're eager to do this work, and that you're aligned with it, and that you are excited to be part of the team and are really passionate about this material. And that could be something they're really eager for in a potential candidate. So kind of both areas that you can play off of here. So to the right, I just have a typical description. This one is, they're seeking a research intern to assist in bioscience research. So like ocean waste plastic, solid waste, brain nutrition, CO2 emissions that will contribute to the overall goal of bioscience startups. And so they list out their responsibilities and skills and qualifications. And so when you're thinking about how your past experiences help connect you, so we're going to look at FRI for this specific one. I like to say you can break it up both ways. Like you see, I have it broken up by the responsibilities and the skills and qualifications. So with the responsibilities, this is going to go along with what I just mentioned. If it is something if this is like the work that you've done, like in your research, like go in on that, get specific. Like they're going to understand all that. They're going to like to see that, like, this is a niche area that you're really passionate about and you have skill sets in. And if not, like I said, you would just you are responsible for being the bridge to help them understand how it kind of overlaps. And so maybe it's not the stream that you really focus in on, but you've done a lot of these laboratory techniques. You've done the process of research. You know how to write proposals, manuscripts, things of that sort. And so you would articulate that and maybe add in, like, maybe it's not that research stream you focus on, but you learn from that stream what you want to do. And that's actually working in, with ocean waste plastics and things of that sort. You can always add like the interest in to kind of help balance it out. And then for the skills and qualifications, for this specific example, you get all those from FRI. And so this one would be a little tedious maybe to list as like a full-on list. So what you might do is you might spend you might do an introduction that says, when I look at your skills and qualifications, I have been able to achieve all of those from doing the 3 semesters of FRI. So that would be things like, I've done the manuscripts, I've done the data analytics, I've worked in a team for 3 semesters, and so on. So I feel very confident in those skills that you've listed. Specifically, I want to highlight, though, some of the responsibilities that you listed. I have been able to do, and this might be where you go in, depending on, like I said, if you've specifically done this work, or you have to kind of be more general and kind of show the connection, you'd spend a whole bunch of time on that. But that's a way when it's like kind of a listy thing, I still like to summarize it. And then you might spend more time on like a bigger focus or a more specific detail of the application. But that way you're getting the full, you're like, selling yourself holistically, getting all that information in without spending like 4 minutes trying to describe this answer. Okay. All right. So I mentioned behavioral-based questions earlier, and those have an acronym that will help you. These questions, it's so definitely the one that I have to use this acronym for myself because they tend to be the run-on responses that, again, might not, if you're not using this to guide you, you might describe a story that lets them know about the experience, but not truly like the impact you made. And so there are 2 different acronyms that you'll see out there for any behavioral-based question. So again, these are going to be anything that say like, tell me about a time when they're asking about a previous experience for you to describe. And the one we're going to use is CAR, but you'll also see STAR. They're very similar. And so just putting that out there, you'll see kind of both. And this is going to help you chunk it up in a way that helps you not only prevent like a huge run-on response, but it's also going to help you, again, keep the focus on you and what contributions you made. So first, you'll want to give the circumstance for the employer. Like, okay, they asked you to tell about a time that you worked on a team. Or maybe you had like you worked with a difficult client. Like, what happened? That tends to be the opener. So circumstance, they have to kind of understand enough context of like what the situation was. And so maybe down here, you'll see I gave an example. Maybe we'll even use this one, like served as a lead editor and task manager on a 6-person team conducting semester-long research. But then the second part that's going to be so important is they want the actions that you took. They are going to want to see how you process this, how you move forward, And so you would explain that. So maybe for the actions here, it was you were the one who was communicating all the tasks and deadlines and reviewed all the documents necessary to ensure accuracy. The R is a very important one I like to explain because I think it can be tricky for some. So like, because if they were to say like name a time, like when the example I gave, like tell about a time that you had a conflict, you don't want to talk so negatively. That's not what this is about, bashing maybe a team member who did not perform well or did not contribute nearly as much as you would think. Results are either going to be, they were either positive and you would explain what the outcome was, or you explain what you learned from it. Okay. Because honestly, like sometimes, like I remember like one of my group projects, like I had to go through and have a conversation with someone to help them with engaging more fully on the tasks that they were responsible for. And it still did not work out to the best. And our project did have struggles because of that. And the result was not the most positive of what it could have been. But what did I learn? That is the part I would focus on. So there's still a positive spin with it, but I'm not bashing anyone and I'm still being truthful. So that I'd really like to point out. It's either what you learned or it was like kind of like a positive outcome. For this one, for the example that we're giving, like successfully presented research findings at campus-wide poster event. This obviously you write these out and then you'll find a way to kind of, it's all going to flow together. You'll have some transition sentences kind of bring it full circle. But that is a way for them to kind of understand the situation, understand what actions you took, overall, what was the impact? Because either it was a huge success and we can see from the success that you really did whatever you said really well, it really made a huge contribution. Or if it wasn't all the best, there's so much that you learned that it made you a better professional for the next time that you had to engage with this activity. Okay. So with that, for these ones, I ended up breaking up, there's lots of different behavioral-based questions that exist. And so instead of listing out full-on responses for these, I wanted to, like, basically when I talked to you about creating a study guide earlier, like how you want to bullet point some things, this is how I organized this section. And it's tricky because depending on the experiences you had in each, you're going to lean on one experience more than the other to maybe be your lead in describing some of these things. So it's just good to have your full options. And like I said, if suddenly you caught yourself being super repetitive in one experience, you would know that you have a lot of options to work with in this specific setting. So one question might be, describe a successful time you worked in a team. Why was it successful and what was your role? And so you guys have a lot of team aspects. And so whether it's the seminar, doing team project, poster presentations, the research stream 1, doing lab procedures and research proposal, or lab stream 2, conducting the research and doing the poster presentation, lots to leverage there. And then it'd be the same thing for the bottom one. Describe a long-term project that you managed. How did you keep everything moving along in a timely manner? And so same thing, you could go on your study guide, have a range of different opportunities to kind of pick from. And again, they usually ask more than one behavioral-based question. So again, it's good to have options to choose from so you're not leveraging the same specific thing every time. Another question might be, have you ever had trouble getting others to agree with your ideas? How did you deal with the situation and were you successful? And so you guys have the team projects for the pre-proposal, and starting with that, the broad topic, narrowing it down to research question as a team. That whole process, and it doesn't have to be like, again, just because maybe it's an agreement. So it doesn't have to be like it was a huge conflict. It was just trying to articulate like why you thought that we should approach it this way, why you should have approached it that way. Maybe so someone saw it different. So you would want to give context of what the specific experience was. And again, describe what happened in that. There's a lot to choose from here. Maybe you want to focus on troubleshooting in the lab or approaching a problem, or how you just manage time in projects with working different styles and different work ethics. So you have a lot to leverage. And again, depending on your situation, like there are times where like you didn't really experience conflict in 3 out of the 4 experiences. And so you want to figure out which one of those that you did. You wouldn't want to be in that situation where you're like, I didn't have any conflicts. Like that's not going to go well as well. There's always kind of an expectation that there could have been something. Like doesn't have to be, again, total disagreement, conflict, angriness, any of that kind of stuff. Okay. But down here, like I said, just with the car example, you wouldn't want to focus negative, especially for questions more like this that might be like disagreement or you had a conflict. It's really going to be focused on what you learned throughout the situation. And then the last kind of example I'd give is just going to be like, when was the last time you got constructive feedback? What was it? What did you do with it? And so you have several different situations, the research proposal, the manuscripts, the posters, real time feedback in the lab on your skills. So a lot to leverage from. And again, maybe you want to go with you could just isolate on one experience and really describe that as your constructive feedback. You also could do that and also include a sentence or two about throughout the whole program of FRI, there's actually several different parts that we're going to get feedback on. That was for our first time doing the research proposal manuscript, Harper, or we did this poster, and then in our labs, we had several things on just enhancing our techniques. One that I want to focus on that I think really describes like how I've really improved with the constructive feedback is XYZ. Okay, that's again a way to kind of get the full, I don't know, like show them in depth. They don't know this. I mean, they might have some sense from your resume or CV, but like this is your opportunity to really expand on it and really showcase how much you got out of this program and give yourself the fullest credit. You're also getting feedback from your peers, peer mentors, and research educators. So lots of that going on. All right, so I told you the last thing I told you earlier, there's a tool that that would really let you put all of this into practice. It is something that, again, I'm going to have, like, you see this kind of like an email template to the right of this slide. This is going to be emailed out to you to kind of articulate how would you do this, but I am going to show you it as well. So that way, you can already see how you engage with this. But basically there's two areas that I would really want you to focus on. And that's like the custom set that's created. It's going to really focus more on a lot of the experiences from FRI, like how you, like a lot of the things I just talked about, the questions I just talked about, and several other questions on like research, so that you would actually get the chance to practice leveraging this experience for, especially if you're going into research related roles, more common questions that you're going to be asked. There's also a general one that covers 80% of questions you might get asked. So this is always a foundational one to make sure you've mastered. Told you, like, as long as you have a pretty solid foundation, you are going to be able to support yourself with questions that you may not be prepared for. And then the AI feedback, you're going to see it gives, these are just some examples that it gives some feedback on. I'll show you the full spectrum. But this just prompted me to remind you to remember when I'm talking about, like, you'll have at least the foundation kind of laid. There's one thing I do like, one other tip I want to give you before I show you a big interview. There's always the potential they might give you a question that is really tricky. That it is, I've heard it in different forms, like, what color would you be, just and why? If you could be any song, what would you be and why? There's always sometimes those, because they want you to see how well you can critical think on those moments. And those are questions that are like, yeah, they can really throw you off. It's definitely when I told you earlier, you have a tip where you want to say, that's a great question. I need some moment to think about it. That's definitely probably going to be one of them. If it does happen to you, there is a strategy that I think works really well, and I just want you to know about it. So when you know your strengths, that's what you would want to focus on for a question that would be like something like you describe yourself and it would throw you off with what they asked. So like the example I might give is like, if they said, Jordan, what color would you be and why? I might say, yeah, I would be Mikado yellow. I chose yellow specifically because in literature, it often represents optimism. And I believe that you are going to get someone who brings a rich enthusiasm that will excite teams to engage in projects and also prevent stress from building up within the organization. I specifically chose Mikado yellow because Mikado yellow is actually a really rare type of yellow. And I do feel like what I bring to the table is something very unique, something of that sort. That was something I learned the hard way. So I love to throw that out there. You do want to prepare as much as you can to have your foundation so that you can answer even questions that throw you off. But I would say there are those very, rare incidences that they're going to ask you a question that is not something you could have prepared for. Focus on your strength. Like I said, my strength was optimism. I knew that could connect to the color and using that for literature, like yellow being representative of optimism. So definitely a strategy to know about just in case that falls into your situation. And so big interview, like I said, the email template is going to have how you make your account and things of that sort. When you sign in, this is going to be like the homepage that you see. And there are lots of different features on here, but the main ones I would want you to know about for this is practice interviews. And right to the left, you're going to see general covers 80% of questions you might get asked. So that's how you'd go about that one. The FRI questions, though, you see it says standard set. You just go to custom sets, and marketing FRI experiences in an interview is right here. And so you would click on it. The first thing it's going to ask you, and this is the same for like the general questions, is if you want eye calibration done. When I told you artificial intelligence is going to give you feedback on several different areas, one area is eye contact if you would like that. And so you just do this like short exercise to get that part of that system, but we're going to just, for the sake of example, practice without eye tracking. And you would see the questions right here to the left that you're going to be asked. So tell me more interests. What's nice about this tool is that it is going to give you, like, there could be questions you're just not even certain how you should answer. The tips are right here on what they're recommending that an employer is going to want to see to help shape your interview or shape your response. So you could read this first, figure out how you want to respond, and then turn on your webcam and actually practice. It's the same setup for all these. This is just a virtual recording that's going to, you can hit play just to hear them ask the question. And as long as your interview response is longer than 30 seconds and you save it, so it's when you're like, oh, that was good, I'm satisfied with that. When you save it, it's going to tell you that AI is taking over and kind of working on the feedback. You would just go right up to my videos and tell me about yourselves right here. You would see like you're going to get an AI score over to the right, and it's going to be a medal at first, and you do click on it. And it's going to show you all the different areas that it kind of picked up on. So pace of speech, how many ums you said, filler words, negative tone, length, and so on, volume, lighting. And for things that like maybe you didn't do the best on, you can right here is action plan. It does give you tips on how you would improve. Like if you said a lot of ums, like how can you improve saying less ums throughout your interview? And when you're ready, you can actually just hit re-record your answer and practice again. So I think this tool is an amazing resource for your own time and as many times you'd like to really verbalize how you intend to answer several interview questions and build that confidence and build that structure and make a huge difference. And like I said, that was practice interviews, went to custom sets for that. It's the same thing with this one, except the only difference is the top 10 questions you might get asked, you can choose from easy, medium, or hard. And they would pull up those questions again, ask you on eye calibration, and so on. So that's what I encourage you to engage with to get some practice in. And then I think the last slide would be when you are ready, you can make a higher Bing appointment to schedule a mock interview. Those are 30-minute sessions long. You can have it be virtual. You can have it be in person. I think those are, again, one of the most realistic ways that you can truly see like how you're performing. I would encourage you, if you've never done it, just to get the test in, just to see how you are and how you're doing with the tone and all the other aspects of interviewing. And yeah, you can also make appointments for any aspect of your career development, but just specifically for the sake of this, this specific topic for the presentation, there are mock interviews and there is interview preparation. So if you actually wanted a discussion about interviewing, more tips, how you might answer certain questions, that's more discussion based. You can also choose that appointment type as well and not have to put yourself in a mock interview in that situation. Okay. But with 5 minutes to spare, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see if there are any questions from the presentation.
So you can either mute yourself, or you can type in the chat if you have any questions for Jordan. We have a few minutes that we can answer questions. I'll kick us off. I'm curious about the appointments for mock interviews. Are they usually readily available, or how far in advance should a student sign up for those?
Great question. I think right now we are a week out. So like it's definitely a week in advance you would want. The appointments do tend to fill up quick. And so I would always recommend planning in advance, because if for last minute you have to cancel, the way we have the appointment set up, as long as you're canceling like the day before or at least 2 hours before your actual appointment, the slot will open back up for another student, and that tends to get really filled quick. So I do recommend worth putting stuff out there so at least you have it saved. It is hard when suddenly you decide you want one, you have to wait a week out. And especially if you know you have interviews coming up. I don't want you to be doing an interview a mock right before you're about to interview, because if there are areas to improve, that's a lot of pressure to figure out, on one day to try to help improve. And so I would recommend a little bit earlier. And it's nice to get a couple mocks in, I will say, because if you do one, I give suggestions on how to improve. I would want you to take those in and have another chance to practice, just so that you can feel that you're at your best when it comes to that. So at least a week out.
Does anyone have any questions for Jordan? It was very comprehensive. So.
Yeah. And I know there can be other things that come up too, and so that's where you could always come in for an appointment or stuff. I know on the spot can be a little tricky. And if you don't have an interview right now, it's sometimes hard to figure out things. But yeah, if there's anything that just came up from the presentation, feel free to ask now. The biggest thing I want you to remember is you got to practice. Okay. Like it's just, it really can make a huge difference. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, well, it doesn't look like there's any questions. So thank you so much, Jordan, for joining us today and ending our Life After FRI series for this fall. And thank you to the audience for being here this afternoon. I hope you all have a great weekend. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.